Всем привет!
Hello,
Рада, что
everyone.
вы сюда пришли.
I'm glad to see
Мы
all of you here.
работаем в Positive Technologies, занимаемся
We
обнаружением
both
атак
work
и
at
пишем
Positive
детекты.
Technologies. We detect
Сегодня мы бы
attacks
хотели
and we write
рассказать
detects.
про
So
наш язык
today we
XP,
wanted to talk
но без
about our
привязки к
language,
каким-то конкретным
XP,
продуктам,
but
а просто
without
показать
reference to
классный
any
инструмент,
particular
который
products. We
помогает
wanted to share
описывать
with you a
экспертизу
great
о том,
tool
как
that
обнаруживать разные
enables
атаки,
you to describe the expertise
делиться
that
этими
helps
знаниями
identify
и
different
проведем
attacks
небольшой мастер-класс по
and share the
написанию не
knowledge.
очень
We
сложного
will organize a
классного
masterclass
правила.
to
Собственно,
write
начнем
not
мы
a
с
very
небольшой теории.
complex but
Это
a
не
great
займет
rule. We'll
много
start with
времени,
theory.
просто
It will
для
not
тех,
take
кто
much
не
time.
знаком с языком XP,
For
никогда
those of you
ничего
who
на
are
нем
not
не писал, мы
familiar with
рассказываем, что
XP
это
and have
такое,
never
для чего
written
это
anything
нужно.
with XP, we will
Потом
say a
мы
couple of
посмотрим,
words
как
about what
настроить
it is
окружение
and
для
what it's
разработки правил,
used for.
воспроизведем атаку,
After that, we'll
немножечко
talk
с ней
about
поработаем,
the
соберем
rules.
разные
We'll
события и напишем правило
demo an
корреляции,
attack.
которое
We
позволит
will write a
выявлять данный
correlation
вид атаки
rule
в
that will
инфраструктуре.
help you
Это по
identify this type
ходу
of attack
мастер-класса, и в
in the
конце мы вообще
infrastructure.
расскажем про
So
какие-то
that will
общие
happen during the
практики,
masterclass. And towards the
которых
end, we will
придерживаемся
share
мы,
with you
почему
some
мы
general
делаем так, а
practices
не
that
иначе, и поделимся каким-то своим опытом.
to which we adhere, and we'll
Если что,
explain
у
why
нас
we
в
do that,
Телеграме у
and generally
Security
we'll exchange our experience.
Experts
In
Community
Telegram,
есть
the
чатик, вот
security
там будут
experts
все
community has
материалы,
its
все
chat,
ссылки,
all the
которые
materials and
будут по
all
ходу
the links
мастер-класса, так что можете
that
присоединиться.
we will be sharing with you during the masterclass will be published there. So please join the chat. So today we've already had a presentation on XP language. If you haven't attended this presentation, let me repeat what was said there. XP stands for Extraction and Processing. It's the language developed by Positive Technologies. You can use it to write rules for normalization, enrichment, and correlation. We use it in correlators of three products: Max Patrol 10, PT, XTR, and Solder, the open source EDR solution that you can download from GitHub. In our products now correlate how are events processed. At the development track, our guys explain how the correlator works, and we will discuss it on a very high level if you haven't encountered it before. First, the events go to the normalizer, where based on the normalization rules, they're unified using our taxonomy fields. After that, normalized events go to enrichment, if enrichment is also focusing on normalized events, and after that, correlation happens, the correlation of events. And what's not mentioned here is that correlation events can also be further enriched. Why XP? And why did we decide to talk about it? There is definitely demand for this language. It's a proprietary language, but in different chats, you regularly encounter people who try to write a simple rule for one of the above-mentioned products, and since there is little information in the public, people find it difficult to write even the most trivial rules. Besides, we have experience and knowledge that we are ready to share, and that means not just some normalization rules, the ready-made rules, but also our processes. So you can follow our news. We will talk more about them at different events. Julia today will demo the tools that we shared with the community as part of our process. They are all part of our processes. Besides, there are public tools that help you develop with XP language. First, it's the VS Code XP. It's an extension for VS that supports XP integration, and you can also do testing. КБТ is dependence. It's dependence on the VS Code. It's the utilities that are related to different activities. There are little pieces of CM that are connected automatically to the VS Code, and you can correlate the events there, normalize them, and do whatever you like with them there. Another thing is XP with all the artifacts and means can be used even without the product. If you want to check whether a particular rule will identify a particular event, you can find the event in the Windows log, you can write an extension, and you can test it.
И, наверное, последнее из общего, что хотел
And
бы
last
сказать, почему
thing,
мы выбрали VS Code именно как
in terms
основу
of
для
theory,
поддержки
why
языка.
did we decide VS
Я не
Code
буду
as
здесь
the
рассказывать о том, какие есть
foundation, the basis
варианты
for the
другие, или
language?
там сравнивать с
I do
какими-то
not want
другими
to
различными
explain
продуктами,
now
IDE-шками. Просто те тезисы,
what other
которыми мы
options are
руководствовались,
available. I don't want to do any
когда мы,
comparisons.
собственно,
It's
добавляли
just that
поддержку языка
here are
XP
the
в виде
reasons
расширения в IDE и VS
for
Code.
why
Во-первых, это
did we
широкие
decide
возможности
to
по
add
написанию
XP
расширений для
support to
поддержки
VS Code. Well,
произвольных
first of all,
языков. То есть
you
фактически
can
VS Code
write extensions.
предоставляет
VS Code
огромные
basically
возможности для поддержки
provides a lot
различных
of
языков, при этом для них
opportunities
не всегда даже требуется
to support
подпись.
different
То есть фактически,
languages,
например,
and you
последний
don't have to
синтаксис,
write the
один
code every
из
time.
наших коллег,
Like the
который
syntax,
сейчас
one of our
находится в зале,
colleagues
он ее сделал
who
в виде
is in the
JSON
room,
файла, мы просто
he
его
did it
подложили,
as a JSON
подгрузили, и
file.
все, по цвету
We just
синтаксиса есть.
uploaded it
Ни одна
there, and
строчка
you
кода не
immediately
написана.
see the
И много
syntax.
таких
We
всяких
didn't
мелких
write
вещей, которые позволяют
a line of
ускорить,
code,
собственно,
and
процесс
there are many other
интеграции
things
языка
inside VS
в
Code
VS
that
Code. Следующее — это то, что
accelerates the
VS Code
language
поддерживает
integration
Language
into
Server
VS Code.
протокол,
VS Code also
который
supports the language
реализуется
server
в Eclipse,
protocol
Emacs, Notepad,
in
Sublime
Eclipse,
и
Emacs,
большом
Notepad,
количестве других
Sublime, and
всяких
many
редакторов. То есть это,
other
собственно, такое и есть.
editing
Была такая
machines.
проблема для поддержки языков,
There
она
used to be a
называется
problem in terms of
M
support of
умножить на N. То есть
languages.
если у вас
It's
есть M
called M
языков
multiplied
и
by
M
N. If you have
редакторов, нужно
M
было для
number of
каждого
languages
написать
and then
отдельный тип
number of
расширения в нужном
editors,
формате, чтобы его,
every time you
соответственно,
had to
поддержать.
write
Вот
an
Language
extension to
Server
support the
протокол ставил
language.
эту задачу
Language
M плюс
service
N. То есть вы
server
можете
protocol
написать единый language сервер, который будет
reduce
переносить
this problem to L plus
и
M,
подключать его к различным редакторам.
M
Получается,
plus
вот у
N,
нас есть
and
одна
you can
реализация, и
write
можно
one
использовать на
extension, and
различных
you can
редакторах.
connect it with
Текущей
different
интерпретации у нас
editors.
language сервер
In the
достаточно
current
бедный, то есть только часть
interpretation, our
функциональности в
language
нем
server is
реализована.
quite
Но если будет
poor,
такая
only
потребность
part of
сообщества, я
functionality
думаю,
is
мы можем
implemented,
расширить
but if
поддержку
there is a
language
need from the
сервера,
community, I'm
если
sure we'll be able to
придут
extend
ребята и скажут, что им,
the
например,
support
в
for language
Sublime не
server.
хватает
If,
соответствующей
for instance, in
функциональности.
Sublime,
Следующий
people
момент —
tell
это
us that in
поддержка
Sublime they
произвольных
need some
WebView.
more
То есть
functionality.
всегда в
Besides,
таких редакторах,
various
которые работают с кодом, не хватает
external web
иногда чего-то
view is
нативного. То есть
supported.
пользователь хочет увидеть какую-то
Sometimes
менюшку,
a user
выбрать
wants to
какие-то
see
селекторы, какие-то настройки, понажимать на такие
menu
кнопочки, и вот
to
как раз
select
настройка WebView произвольного
selectors,
формата
to press different
позволяет
buttons,
это
and
реализовать. То есть фактически все, что можно отверстать, все, что можно сделать,
arbitrary
может быть в виде
web
какой-то
view
панельки в VS
enables
Code.
that.
Это очень удобно. Юля как раз на примере
It
покажет,
can
как
be
это
represented
непосредственно
as a panel in
работает.
the VS
Помимо этого, это
Code,
большой
and
магазин
Yuli is
уже
going
имеющихся
to
расширений,
demonstrate how
которые
it works.
позволяют
Besides, there
очень
is
круто сэкономить
a big
время. То есть
store
туда
of
сразу
available
интегрированы с
extensions
коробки
that saves
Git,
your
есть
time.
различные там настройки над Git,
Everything is
например,
already
GitLab,
integrated.
Workflow,
There
по-моему,
are
расширение
add-ons for
называется,
GitLab,
GitLens и всякие, в общем, различные такие
GitLens,
спелл-чекеры,
and
если вы
all
не хотите,
spell
чтобы в ваших
checkers.
комментариях в
If
коде
you
были
don't
опечатки, можете
want
какой-то спелл-чекер подключить.
to see any typos
Следующий
on your
момент — это,
comments,
собственно,
that you can
кросс-платформенность. Но на текущий момент
enable a
все
spell
прекрасно
checker.
понимают, что
Besides
не Windows
cross-platform,
одним,
we
и
all understand that it's not
посему
just
поддержка из коробки
the
Windows, Linux
Windows.
и macOS в какой-то
Not
части — это
everything boils
очень
down
важная
to
вещь.
Windows. We are also supporting
Отдельная
Linux
фича,
and
которую
Mac
принес,
OS
кстати, один
out
из
of the box.
членов
Another feature
сообщества
that a member of the
нашего —
community
это веб-версия
introduced
через докер.
is
Например, на
the
Маке это
web
как раз
version
очень
via
важная
Docker.
вещь.
This
То
is
есть это
an
когда вы можете
important feature
получить
for
редактор в
Mac.
вебке. То есть вы разворачиваете докер-контейнер,
You get an
подключаете его
editor
к
in the
хосту,
web
к
browser.
определенному порту, и вот у вас, пожалуйста, редактор просто в
You
браузере.
can have
Если есть
you can
какие-то
have an editor
особые
in a browser.
предпочтения или какие-то
If you have any
ограничения, можете
preferences or
использовать
if
для
you have
удобства именно такого.
any
Ну и последнее,
restrictions
вроде
on
не
your
такой
work,
важный, но, мне
this is
кажется, интересный
another good
пункт —
option.
это
And last but not
возможность
least,
свой редактор привести к тому виду,
your
каким вы хотите
editor
его
can
видеть. То есть различные цветовые
be
схемы, расцветка
represented the way
синтаксиса,
you
который
would like it
привязан на конструкции
to
языка. То есть вам не
appear.
надо делать под разные языки разные темы.
For
Дело в том,
different
что там
languages,
как раз
don't
именно
need to have
привязывается
different highlights, for
идентификатор там
instance.
ключевых слов, которые есть в языке, и тема
The
меняется
key,
автоматически.
the
Их
word
есть очень
identifies, the
много
theme can
готовых.
change
Если, не
depending
знаю,
on
вы
those
любите на
identifiers.
белом
There are many
фоне желтый
ready-made
текст, от
themes.
которого
If you
у
like
90%
to
просто
see
бегут в
yellow
глазах, но вам прям так нравится, вы можете
text
эти хотелки у
against a
себя
white
без
background,
проблем
like 90% of people hate that,
реализовать.
but if you are one of those who would prefer yellow text over a
Пару
white
слов о
background, you
том,
can
как
do
раньше
that
у
as well.
нас выглядела разработка
A
контента.
couple of words. How did
Когда нам
we
надо было
develop
написать
content
правила
in
в
the
наш
past?
продукт,
When we
мы
needed to write
воспроизводили атак,
a
чтобы
rule in
получить
our product,
событие,
we
пытались написать
replicated an
какой-то
attack to
код.
get the
Дальше надо
event, then we wrote
провалидировать,
a
получить
code. After
какую-то
that, you
ошибку, его
validate it.
исправить, провалидировать
You
еще
find
раз,
the error,
воспроизводить,
you validate, you
воспроизвести
find an
атаку
error, you
заново,
validate, you replicate
посмотреть, что правило не
the
рабочее, что
attack
в нем была
once
допущена
more.
не синтаксическая
Then you
ошибка, а
see
логическая,
that the
переписать
rule
код
doesn't
заново,
work, that it's not a problem of syntax, but of the logic. You rewrite the code, you reproduce it again, it caused a lot of pain and suffering. because in the product there is some minimal highlighting of the syntax, no useful features, something else. When we got this extension that Dima wrote, we immediately found lots of useful stuff in there, like the highlights on the syntax, snippets, and templates. We got the ability to test the code of the rule out of the editor. You copy, you paste into the editor, it normalized, it correlated, and then you will see immediately whether your code will cause an alert or not. And after that, we also added a couple of web views to edit meta information and localization, but I'll talk about that later. To start using the extension, all you have to do is press one button, install, and everything that I've explained you're going to get immediately. You don't need any extra tools, or you don't have to do anything else. Well, in fact, not. You will need VS Code because this extension needs to be installed into VS Code. If you want to test the rules, to normalize, to correlate, and to enrich the rule, you will need knowledge-based tools. They are the tools that are in the public domain. You can download them and use them. You can write the code without any attachment to the product. We also have an open repository with the rules. We position it as the property of the community. That means that anyone can come and write a rule and upload it into the repository and share the rules. If you don't know how to detect an attack in your CRM system, you can come to the repository and see how other wonderful experts who know how to do it, do it. I suggest that we start by me showing to you how to do the setup of the environment. This is what I prepared for you. I downloaded that in advance because in addition to KB tools, we'll also have to clone the repository with open rules. And all of this is pretty heavy. Here is the repository of the experts security community, security experts community. It's very easy to download it. You copy the link, git clone, and you get a complete set of everything that people shared with the public. We have the repository, we have KB tools, we have VS Code, and we are ready to start working. Our extension is in the marketplace of VS Code. You enter correlation, and you install it. After installation, in the settings, you have to state the path to the KB tools. You unpack them first. And you add them to the settings. It's all pretty straightforward, nothing complicated. In just a couple of minutes, we are ready to develop content and study the attacks and make a contribution to the community's well-being. Here is an attack that I want to use a demo, Get System. Get System is used in different systems. Metasploit uses it and other frameworks as well. We'll see what happens in the system when an attacker who is somewhere on the other side of the world is typing in this curious command, and how can we detect it? Now, in a couple of words, if you haven't used Metasploit, I don't know if there's anyone in the audience who has never used Metasploit. In a couple of words, what this attack is all about.
Пользователь, который авторизуется в системе, он
The
имеет какие-то
user
базовые
is
права. Если
authorized
пользователь у нас
in
не
the system
привилегированный, он
and
хочет
has
там что-то поадминистрировать,
some
может быть,
rights.
поставить какой-то
It's
софт.
an unprivileged user,
Windows
but the user
интеллигентно
wants to
предлагает ему ввести
install
исходные данные
something,
того
and
пользователя, который,
Windows
собственно, это
asks
может
to
сделать, если у него таких,
enter the
соответственно, прав
account
нет. Это один уровень, такой
data
базовый,
for the
очень
account
грубый
that
уровень
is
доступа к
authorized
энергии.
to
Следующий —
take
это,
that action.
собственно, члены
So
группы
that's the
локальных администраторов, которые имеют
basics.
огромное
And
количество
then the local
привилегий.
admins who
Но
have a
при
lot of
этом они у
privileges
нас не имеют привилегий системы.
do
Они
not
имеют
have
привилегии системы,
the
поэтому
system
для атакующего
privileges.
это очень
But the
полезно
system
с точки зрения
privileges
проведения
for
атак
the
на
attacker is
локальную
very
систему. Поэтому
useful.
сегодня Юля покажет вам
So
как
today,
раз
Julia
именно
is going
написание
to
детекта
show to
на
you how
первую,
to write
вторую
a
и третью
detect
технику
for the
GetSystem, то есть GetSystem команда в
first, second,
интерпретере, которая
third
есть.
technique in Get
Каким
system.
образом мы, собственно, будем на них писать правила. Немножко расскажу про то, как, собственно, сама атака проводится. Первое — это у нас name pipe impersonation.
A name pipe impersonation. This is where the attack starts.
Что в данном случае происходит? Сначала в метапретере создается отдельный тред, в котором создается именованный канал.
First, you start
Именованный
with
канал,
a
через который будет
named
проводиться имперсонация.
channel in the
Имперсонация — это
thread
что такое?
for
Это
impersonation.
возможность переиспользовать
Impersonation,
права
what is it?
пользователя
It's
у
the
себя. То есть,
ability
например,
to
пользователь,
reuse
как
the
она,
user
например,
rights
может быть
on
использована
your
там
side.
легитимно.
The
Пользователь
user,
там
for
авторизуется,
instance,
куда-то
the
приходит,
user
и нужно,
gets
чтобы
authorized,
серверная часть
and
переиспользовала
the
привилегии для доступа в какой-то
server
внешний,
needs to reuse the
на какой-то внешний,
privileges
собственно,
for the
кусок.
use of at
И
some
полный
external
объем
node.
его прав. То есть не сам сервис ходит
The
куда-то, а мы
full
используем
scope
права
of the rights.
пользователя для того,
It's
чтобы
not the
куда-то
server
подключиться.
that's
Поэтому как это
calling
работает?
something, but we use the
Устанавливается,
user rights.
добавляется сервис.
How does it work?
Сервис
We add a
обращается к
service.
этому пайпу,
The
который был
service
создан
calls the pipe
метапретером.
that
Так
was
как
created
сервис
by the
запускается с права
metaprether.
псевдопользователя System идет на этот пайп, в
There
метапретере
is
вызывается
a
функция
pseudo-user
impersonation
system.
pipe,
The system goes to
имперсонирует
the
этот
pipe.
пайп, получается, что мы
The
можем
function of
получить
pipe
токен,
impersonation is called. We
который
can
нам
get a
предоставит
token
привилегии системы. Это, собственно,
that will
первый вариант.
provide us
Второй вариант —
the privileges of
это
the
дроппер
system.
админ.
The
Здесь
second
работает немножко
option is the
по-другому.
dropper
То
admin.
есть сначала
It
сбрасывается
works
библиотека,
differently.
собственно,
First, the
дроппер.
library
Сбрасывается
dropper
библиотека в временную директорию. Это DLL-ка. Это
libraries
DLL-ка и ее
dropped
обращение
into a
через
temporary
run
directory. It's a DLL. DLL calls
добавляется
DLL
сервис. Эта команда, сервис
32exe.
тоже запускается от
This
системы.
command is added to
И
the
после
service.
этого
Service
происходит
is also
абсолютно
launched via
аналогичная вещь.
system, and
Практически то же самое
the
происходит с
rights are
RPC, поэтому, я
stolen.
думаю, тут
The
мы
same happens
анализировать не
with
будем и
CRPC, so
непосредственно
I don't
перейдем уже
think
к
we need to
процессу
go into details.
сбора
Instead,
событий,
let's
написания правил,
turn to the
тестирования и
whole
так далее.
process of collecting events, writing the rule, and
Да, я
testing the
сейчас буду
rule.
собирать события. Я еще
I'm
кратко
going to
напомню,
collect
о
the
чем
rules
каждая
first.
техника. Мы сегодня
The
посмотрим на
events
все,
first.
которые реализует
We will
Metasploit.
not
Вот. Выборочно третий мы
investigate
смотреть
all
не
of these
будем, потому
techniques.
что
The
она
third one
работает только
we will
под
skip because the third
32-битную
technique
винду,
works
поэтому посмотрим
only
первую,
with the
вторую и
32-bit
четвертую.
Windows. We will only look into the first, second, and the fourth
Вот,
techniques.
собственно, у нас есть небольшая лабораторная среда,
Here
в
is
которой
a
есть как
lab
бы атакующая
environment.
машина Scala Linux,
There is
есть
an
несколько
attacking
рабочих
machine,
станций.
Sky
Вот,
Linux.
собственно,
There
сейчас
are
я
several
поднимаю
working
listener,
stations.
который будет слушать от стук. И у меня уже на машине лежит исполняемый
And on the
файл.
machine, I
Тут
have an
можно его увидеть.
executable
Это
file. You
инсталлер.
can see it
На
here.
самом
It's the
деле это вот та
installer.
самая
In
полезная
fact, it's
нагрузка, которая
the
должна как бы предоставить
workload
хакеру
that
доступ во внутреннюю
that has
сеть к этой
to
машине.
give the hacker access to the
Вот,
machine.
как сказал Дима, чтобы
As Dima
эта
has
атака
already
была
said, for
удачной,
this
надо,
attack to be
чтобы
successful,
у запускаемого процесса был административный токен.
the
Поэтому я
executed
сразу
process
запускаю
needs to
как
have an
администратор.
administrative
Вот,
token.
в
So
реальной
I'll
жизни там могут быть
go
разные
ahead as an
способы. Может
admin,
быть,
but
какая-то
in
очень классная
reality,
социальная
different other
инженерочка,
options are
чтобы
possible. You can
убедить
also
пользователя
do
так
some
запустить.
social
Может
engineering
быть,
in order to
какой-то
persuade the user
UART bypass до
to
этого,
do
что-то
it,
еще,
or
но в
you
рамках
can
написания детекта
use a
это сейчас
bypass,
не
but
имеет
it
значения.
doesn't matter really for
Вот,
the
собственно,
purpose of
открылась
writing a
сессия
detect.
Metasploit, мы в нее провалились
Metasploit
и
session
понимаем,
is
что сейчас
opened.
вот у нас
We go
там
into it,
права какого-то
and we see
пользователя,
that
который
now we
не
have the
является
rights of some
системой.
user, but this user
Это
doesn't have
help-get
system rights.
system.
It's some help-get
Вот.
system.
И мы сейчас будем просто по очереди
And
вызывать каждую
we will
технику.
call every technique
Начнем
one
мы
by
с
one.
первой.
We'll start
Обожаю
with the
просто
first one.
Metasploit за то, что пишешь
I love
команду, он такой,
Metasploit
все
because you
классно,
write
я
a command
отработал,
and
и
it's like,
теперь ты
oh yeah, I'm
система.
done. Now you are the
Собственно,
system.
вуаля.
So there.
А, Любой детект начинается с того, что
Any detect
мы воспроизводим
starts
атаку, собираем события, смотрим,
with
как это
replicating
работает,
an attack.
находим
We collect
нужное.
the events, we see how they
Наше
work,
расширение
we
сейчас
find
поддерживает
what we
много
need.
способов
Our
сбора событий.
extension
Это, собственно,
supports
из
many different ways
нашего
of collecting
CM.
event information. We
Это
can take
так
them
себе
out of our
способ. Мы
CM,
хотим
but it's
немножко
not the
абстрагироваться
best
от
way.
продукта,
We want
поэтому можно
to
напрямую
get away
копировать
from the product,
XML
so
из
you can
VTX, и на
copy
самом
XML
деле
directly
обрабатываться
from
все будет
VTX,
ровно
and
так
then
же
everything will
для
be processed in the same
дальнейшей
way
работы.
for
Разницы вообще
further
никакой.
work. It
Вот,
doesn't really matter.
поэтому мы сейчас прям
It
пойдем
makes no
вторым путем.
difference. So we
Мы
will
пойдем в
now
Event Viewer. Не
take
самый удобный
the
инструмент,
second
чтобы искать в
approach,
генеалоге.
the Event
Вот, но когда
Viewer.
знаешь,
It's
что
not
искать, как бы можно поискать,
the
прям
most
скопировать с email-ки и
convenient tool
посмотрим,
to
как это
find logger,
работает.
but if you know what you're looking for,
Собственно,
let's
повышение
just
привилегий
see
через
how it
именованные
works.
каналы, значит, нам нужны
Name channels,
события, связанные
improving
с именованными
privileges. We
каналами, и эти
need
события ищутся
events
СМО, в
connected
частности, это
to
17
named
18
events. This is
события,
17,
которые
18.
мы отфильтруем просто,
Event
чтобы
17 and
найти их
18 will
быстро.
filter
Вот,
them
17
out to find them
событие о
quickly.
том,
Here
что
is
некоторый
event
именованный
17.
канал был
Some
создан,
name
собственно,
channel
нашим
was
инсталлером. Мы
created
видим,
by
какое у
our
него
installer,
странное имя.
and we
Возьмем,
see that it
скопируем это
has a
событие
weird
и
name.
куда-то
Let's
себе
copy
сохраним.
this
Скорее
event.
всего, оно
Now
нам
let's save it
понадобится для
somewhere.
детекта.
Probably you
Вот,
will need it
сразу
for the
за ним
detect.
идет подключение к этому
Following
именованному
it,
каналу.
there is
Вот,
connecting
и
to this
мы
named
видим, что
channel.
имя канала
And we
совпадает.
see
И,
that the
как
name of the
сказал
channel
Дима,
is the
первая
same.
техника, она
Is the same
работает
one.
через
Uh,
установку
And the
службы
first
или
technique,
сервиса,
as Dim
которая как раз и
explained, for the first
подключается к
technique, you
этому
need to
каналу,
install a
чтобы украсть этот
service
токен.
that connects to the channel
Вот,
to steal
поэтому
this
мы
token.
также найдем релевантное
We
событие
will
установки
find a
сервиса.
relevant
Это
event
стандартный
of
уже
installing
журнал
this service.
Windows,
This
событие
is the Windows log.
7045.
This is event
Вот, и его мы тоже себе
7045.
забираем для
We
того,
will
чтобы
copy it
начать писать, собственно, наше правило, которое будет
to
ловить эту
start
атаку.
writing the rule.
Еще раз напомню о том, как
Let me remind you
работает
once again
пайплайн обработки внутри.
how the
То есть у нас
pipeline
сейчас есть сырые
processing
события,
works inside.
которые
We've got
поступают на
raw
вход
events
в
right now.
инструменты
They're
SDK.
used as input
Дальше
for
их
the
надо
SDK tools,
нормализовать.
and after that,
То есть
they
все
need
поля, которые есть в
normalizing.
событиях, разложить в
All fields in
какие-то
the events,
известные
they
поля и
must
привести
be
всех к
associated with some
единому
known
виду.
fields,
Для
and
чего
all of this
это
must be
делается,
brought
в
to
принципе?
one
Потому что
view.
есть разные
Why is this
системы, разные
necessary?
логи,
There are
они
different
бывают в
systems,
разном
different
формате,
logs.
и не
They
хочется
come in
каждый раз для
different
каждого правила
formats,
использовать
and
какой-то
we
разный
don't want
синтаксис.
to
Поэтому мы все
use different
события, независимо от того, из какого они пришли
syntaxes
источника,
for different
приводим к какому-то единому виду, раскладываем в
different
какие-то
platforms,
заранее
different
известные поля
use
таксономии, после
cases.
чего
So we
уже
use
начинаем работу.
established taxonomy fields,
Перед
and
тем,
we
как
will
коррелировать
associate
события,
them
можно
with the
обогатить.
event
Дальше это
fields.
событие попадает в
After
коррелятор,
that,
где
before correlating, we can
на
enrich the event.
потоке, как это
After that,
происходит.
it goes into the
В
correlator.
коррелятор приходит очень-очень много
In the
разных
correlator,
событий. Они
you see a lot
отфильтровываются по
of different
определенным
events coming
признакам,
in. They will be
склеиваются между
filtered
собой по
along
определенным
certain
полям.
categories.
Все
They
это
will
указывается в
be
коде
glued
правила
together,
корреляции. И если
also
в итоге это
along
получается
certain
какая-то
fields,
цепочка,
which are
которая
prescribed
описана,
in the
то
correlation rule. And
происходит
as
как
a
бы
result,
алерт, и
we
система
get
нам
a certain described chain.
сигнализирует о
Then
том,
an
что
alert is generated, and the system
узел
will signal
подвергся
to us
какой-то вот
that this
атаке,
node
собственно, о чем говорит
was
правило
attacked
корреляции. Вот, еще
attacked in
совсем немножко
accordance with
теории,
this
правда, осталось
correlation
чуть-чуть,
rule.
о том, как вообще
A
выглядит
little bit of
правило
theory.
корреляции. В нем, в
The
принципе, есть
correlation
3
rule
блока.
has
Это
3 blocks.
директивы event, это, собственно, те
The
события, которые
directive
мы будем
event
между собой
are the
коррелировать,
events that we are
клеить,
going to
фильтровать
correlate,
и прочее.
glue and filter.
Директива rule, которая, в принципе,
The
описывает то, как же
the
события
rule
должны
directive that
взаимодействовать между
describes
собой.
how the events should
Собственно, вот
correspond to
тут
each other,
небольшой
how
синтетический
they
пример
are
получается, что в
associated with each
каждом
other.
ивенте еще
Here is
есть
a little
ключ.
syntax
То есть
example.
у
In
нас
every
должно
event, there is
прийти
also a
два
key.
события,
We
которые
must see
произошли на
two
одном
incoming
узле,
events
потому что
that
общий event
happened
SRC host
on the same
и
node,
идентификатор
and
процесса из первого
the
события
process
должен
identifier
совпадать с
from the first
идентификатором
event
процесса из
must
второго
match
события.
with
И, собственно,
the
за
identifier
первым событием
of the
должно
second
наступить
event.
второе в
And
течение
after
10
the
секунд,
first
тогда у
event, the
нас
second event should
сработает
happen within the
правило
period of 10
корреляции.
seconds. And then the correlation rule will be
Собственно,
executed.
этот синтаксис позволяет нам описывать,
This
выбирать не
syntax
только атомарные события
allows
из
us
всего
to
потока,
select not
где мы
only
можем
some
поискать
one-off
что-то по
events out of
регулярному
the flow
выражению.
that can be searched using
Такой
regular
подход позволяет
expressions.
нам описывать
This
очень
approach
сложную
allows us
логику
to describe
обнаружения.
a complex
Например, мы
logic
можем
of
использовать
detection. We can
необязательные
use
события,
unnecessary events, like this one, mandatory. There is mandatory events and unmandatory events. This event is a mandatory event. It tells you that something bad is happening on the node, and after the mandatory event, you can have, or you may not have, another event, and depending on whether you have the event and what kind of event it is, you can generate more or less critical incidents. You can rewrite the fields. You can display the data differently so that the machine knows immediately what's happening and what to do next. Or another example, there is an event, and then a different event should happen 5 times in a row. And after that, there should be yet another event, like unsuccessful authorization. We don't know how many times it's going to happen, but we know that it's going to happen many times. We just add a plus. It means that it can happen once, twice, or 100 times, but within 10 seconds, or 2 seconds, or whatever. We can also use with different. It means that all the events that are here after the plus, the quantifier, they must have a different theory. This is the rule that identifies suspicious requests. If the same call, the same request is coming 10, 15 times, it's not very interesting. Probably it's the same script that triggered many times. The events can also be merged using OR. You can use sequences, you can use different timers, whatever. And now we are ready with the demo. Demo on how to write a rule. First, let's take a look at the repository that I cloned. It's an open repository with the rules. Here you have system content for normalization. Here you can see mostly normalization for Windows. Several formulas. You can also find macros here. And there is a Windows Open package. These are Windows detects. And this is where we're going to put all the different rules to detect the attacks. It's not a very big folder at the moment. This is the correlation rules folder. It contains one rule only for medium attack execution. Let's set up a folder for privileges escalation.
И внутри этого пакета мы уже...
And inside here, just a sec.
Мы готовы создать наше правило корреляции.
Here we are ready to set up our correlation rule. This is a nice web view for the setting of the correlation rule. We first enter the name.
И у нас есть различные шаблоны, потому что большинство
And we also have here available different templates. Most of the rules are pretty typical. You don't want to write all the code from scratch. So we selected several templates that we see repeating themselves all the time. So we added them to the folder. You can find a template. So here is the rule from the template. Some events are already entered. Some filters have already also been added. They are the filters that we might need, but in fact, what I suggest we do is we write the rule from scratch, because using the template is not very interesting unless it's your routine. And on the way, I will show you different snippets and highlights of the syntax and how easily this can be done in test tool. One approach that we make popular is the driven approach. We write correlation based on events and test. We test the rule all the time in order to improve it. So it's a continuous improvement, really. These are the events that we collected at the previous stage. And the first thing you do with them is you tell the normalizer the type of the events that we deal with. This is Windows. So we tell the machine that it's Windows. And after that, we can normalize them to see how they will look when they are normalized. Here is an event ID 17, creating the pipe, event ID 18, connecting to the pipe, and 7045. These are our three events, and the attack starts by creating a named channel. In my demo, I called events event 1, event 2, event 3, but it's best if you give more legible name to the event, because, you may not be the only person working with this rule, so I suggest that you give a proper name to each event. Say pipe created.
Мы должны написать фильтр, как вообще какое событие из всего будет нам говорить о том, что был создан именованный канал.
Now, how do we know that a pipe was created? What should be the event?
От Windows.
So we tell the system that it needs to be a Windows event. Oh, here is another wonderful thing that I love very much in these extensions. I do a lot of typos, and I forget that you need to add a double equation mark. So the system tells me immediately that you need to fix this typo, because if it's just one, equal sign, then the rule will not work.
Классное дополнение, все очень здорово.
And we digit 17.
Что еще тут?
It's a wonderful rule. Everything works. What else? You can view different fields and select what looks interesting. For instance, this one, complete path to our process, which had the workload. But these values can change from system to system, from attack to attack. So I suggest you never use them in the filter. Just don't use them. Another thing that I wanted to add here is the user. The user should not be the system, because the system continuously creates a lot of pipes, and then you will have to balance it out nicely so that you do not get a lot of irrelevant alerts. And then the hacker, steps to the left, steps to the right, and you will miss the attack just because you had this this value. Windows is not register dependent, so if you compare something with the lines using regular expressions, you have to put it into the lower register before comparing. If you start certitude like this, or if you do it like that, then the same process will be launched. But in the logs, it's going to be represented both ways. So for the Windows systems, it's very important that you do everything in lower register. One other feature here is hints. As soon as you open the round brackets, a hint appears, pops up on the screen and shows you what's this all about, and it even gives you examples. This is super convenient account name system. So we are done with event 1. Then we had another event when the service was created.
Это у нас тоже получается событие от Windows.
This is yet another Windows event. Message ID 7045, as we have already seen.
Давайте еще раз на него взглянем, посмотрим.
Let's take a look at it once again. Let's see what's interesting we have here. The host, the log, an event identifier, the event ID. The service starts as a local system. And here is a line that got into the service. It looks pretty strange, and it tells you a lot that something illegitimate is happening here, just because it writes directly into the pipe. It's something that we need to account for in our detect, and we'll use a regular expression for it. Regex, this is the function that accepts 3 arguments, the field that we add to it, the regex itself that we want to use for matching, and the third argument determines the group. You can use brackets there for different groups, or if you want just to get a match on the line, not a group, you write 0, which means complete match.
Берем в функцию приведения к нижнему регистру.
We bring it to the lower register again. And the regex, cmd.exe, something else happens. After that, it goes to the pipe.
Поэтому так много всяких скобочек и прочего.
You screen for everything, that's why we use so many brackets and everything else. We are done with the service event, and only one more event remains. It's when the service connects to the pipe.
Что мы про него можем сказать?
What can we say about it?
То, что это делает процесс cmd.exe, который, собственно, у нас...
The cmd.exe process does it. We have it here in the start service process, and it happens from the in the system username.
Получается, что... Subject process name.
Subject process name
cmd.exe.
Is cmd.exe. Great. So we described all processes that must be filtered out of this great flow of data that comes from the log. What did we forget? The key directive. The key directive needs to glue all these 3 events into one flow, and when we were collecting the events, we also forgot the name of the, here it is, object name matches. It's the same as here, object name, and it's the same as name of the service. In all 3 events, the object name should coincide.
Мне очень нравится, что я могу не писать название.
I like it that I don't need to write everything by hand. I can just start. I can just give it the first letters.
Это прям супер классно.
This is super great.
Собственно, сама директива руль, которая должна описать о том, что...
The rule directive. What is it?
Я просто плохо слышу.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Да, спасибо большое. Но у меня бы сейчас все равно правило не собралось, его прям
But the
показала,
rule
как это работает. Спасибо большое.
well, I would have been able to show you how the system works when there is a typo. And now I will not be able to do it.
Собственно, тут мы
Okay, so
должны
we fixed the
указать
typo. Anyway, directive rule.
название правила, которое у нас
This is
будет
where we need
работать
to
по
give the name
наступлению
of the
этих
rule
событий. И
that
дальше мы
needs to
указываем, как у нас
operate
должны
when these
происходить
events
события. У нас
happened. And
должен
after that,
создаться канал,
we
у нас должна потом
identify
создаться
the
служба,
sequence of events.
и
First, the
потом у нас
pipes
должно быть
created. After that, the
подключение
service is
к
created.
этому
And after that,
именованному
the
каналу.
service is connected to the pipe.
И все это, допустим, должно произойти в течение
And all of this should happen over
3-10 секунд.
2, 3, 10 seconds.
Секцию on мы пока пропустим, я попозже о ней
The
расскажу.
on
И еще
section, this
обязательно
on
для
bit,
правила
we will skip it for now. I'll come back to it later.
Это
Emit
то,
is
что мы
also
в
very
итоге
important for the
получаем по
correlation rule.
сработке
It's
нашего
what
правила.
we will get
У
when
нас
the
есть
rule
несколько вещей, которые можем получить.
works.
Это может быть
There are
просто
several
event,
things that
как
we can
такое
get. We can
событие
get an
информационной
event as
безопасности, на которое
an event
оператору
of
надо
information
обратить внимание.
security
Это может
that
быть инцидент,
needs to draw
то
the
есть это
attention of the
прям
operator,
что-то
or it can
супер
be an
high critical
incident,
важное,
something
когда
very
очень
high
надо бежать,
critical,
расследовать,
super
реагировать,
important
и точно
when you
нельзя
need to
пропускать
respond,
внимание.
that you need to
У нас
investigate.
есть сабруль, это
Subrule
вспомогательное правило.
Subrule
То есть
is
когда
an
само по
additional
себе оно
rule,
описывает
supporting
какую-то
rule.
сложную
It
логику, она
describes
происходит,
a
но не
complex
несет в
logic. The
себе
logic
какой-то смысловой нагрузки с
hits,
точки
but
зрения
it
безопасности.
creates
Обычно
no
сабрули мы
security
используем, когда
threats.
логика
Usually,
обнаружения
we
настолько
use
сложная, что
subrules
просто
when
в рамках
the
одного правила, в
detection
рамках там одной
logic is
страницы
so
кода
complex
это
that
описать
uh,
очень сложно.
you
Ну
can't
и сабрули
describe
еще
it
очень хороши,
on one
когда
page in
какая-то
one
логика
rule.
правила
And subrules
повторяется
are
из раза в
also
раз. Вот это
great
тоже можно вынести в отдельный файл и просто ее переиспользовать, а не
when the same
репастить.
logic is
И
reused
драфт — это тоже
several times.
такой вспомогательный тип
And
правила.
draft
Он
is
больше
another
для команд, которые занимаются
supporting
написанием правил
rule.
в
It's
соках
for
или
the
где-то
teams
еще,
that
потому что
write
мы не
rules in
всегда
the
можем быть
SOCs
уверены, что
or some
правила,
such
которые
place.
мы
We
пишем, они прямо очень
are not
хороши,
always
и в
sure that
итоге
the
не
rules that
будут
we
сильно фаузить и
develop are
привлекать к себе
excellent
ненужного
and
внимания.
they will
Поэтому мы ставим им статус драфт, чтобы нашим
not
аналитикам
draw
показать
too much
то,
attention to
что
themselves. So
это пока
we
экспериментальная логика. Нам
use a
кажется, что
draft
она должна
to
работать
show the
правильно, но
analyst that
уверенности
for
пока
us
в
this is
этом
still
нету, и
experimental
поэтому
logic. We
если у вас
think that it
произойдет
should
сработка,
work correctly, but we are
прикольно,
not
но,
sure. So
возможно, это
if
еще не
you are going
что-то
to get a
опасное,
hit,
просто чтобы
it's
ребята понимали,
interesting,
что
but
это пока еще
maybe
не до
not
конца
necessarily
отлаженная
this
логика.
dangerous.
Вот,
It's
у
for
этого
people to
правила
understand
я
that this
поставлю
logic is
статус
not yet
suspend, и дальше
tried
надо
and tested.
выбрать важность.
For this rule, I'm going to
Собственно,
use
это
the
такая вещь немножко
incident
субъективная.
category, and
У
we
нас
also
есть
need
best
to
practices
identify
внутри команды,
importance.
как мы вообще это
This is pretty
определяем, что
subjective.
есть
There is
high,
best
что есть
practice side
medium,
our
что есть
team,
low.
what's high, what's medium, what's low.
Вот. И я считаю, что
I
повышение
think
привилегий для системы — это
that
супер
increasing
важно. И на
privileges,
это сразу надо
elevating
остановиться
privileges
и пойти
is super
расследовать.
important
Вот.
for the
Еще
system
правило не
and needs
отработает,
investigating.
если в нем
The
не будет
rule will
обязательных
also
полей.
not work
Минимум
unless
для
it has certain
сработки
mandatory
правила нужно
fields.
задать
For the rule
4 поля. Это
to work, you
subject,
need to
action,
set
object
4
и
fields
статус.
minimum.
Собственно, кто что
Subject,
сделал,
object,
чтобы в итоговой сработке была вообще какая-то
and
минимальная
status.
информация. Это поля типа enum, в них нельзя писать
These are
какую-угодно
enum
фигню,
type of
то есть есть какие-то заранее
fields. You can't
определенные
write
значения,
anything
которые
you like in
могут так
there. Instead,
фигурировать.
they're
Поэтому мы
populated
тоже
with
себе
certain
сделали такую
values that
подсказочку с
are
выпадающим
preset.
списком,
That's why we use
чтобы
this
мы понимали,
pop-up
какие
list
значения тут вообще можно
or drop-down
использовать.
list so that we know which
Пускай будет
values can be used here.
escalate,
Account, let it be escalate,
session, success.
session and success.
Вот, мы написали вообще минимально жизнеспособное правило.
This is a minimally viable
И
rule
теперь
that
мы
we
можем
have
вернуться в
just
наши
drafted.
тесты,
And we
запустить
can go
быстрый
back to our
тест
test. We
и
can
посмотреть
run
на
a
то,
quick
что у нас
test and
есть очень классная
see
ошибка, я неправильно
that we have a
использовала
wonderful mistake
Я
here. I didn't
забыла
use the
передать
function
третий
correctly. I
аргумент.
forgot to assign a
Правило не
third
собралось.
argument to it, and
Название
the
стало
rule
красным. Мы понимаем,
didn't
что есть
got
какая-то ошибка.
together.
Вот это срочно
We see
прокрутить,
that
чтобы
there
не
is a
есть
mistake.
какая-то
This one is
ошибка, а не как
highlighted.
бы
It
правило
shows me
завалилось.
that this is where my mistake is. This is what
Пробуем еще
ruined
раз.
my rule. Let's try it again.
Да что ж такое-то? Простите.
What's wrong? I'm sorry.
Ура! Очень
Yay.
классно. Я наконец-то сделала жизнеспособное правило, чтобы вы понимали,
Finally,
если бы
I
я сейчас
produced a
делала в
viable
CM, у меня
rule.
бы на эту откладку
If
3
I were doing
ошибок
this in
ушло
CM
бы минимум
to
3
fix
минуты,
those
потому что
3
я бы попыталась
errors, it would
установить
have taken
правило,
me at least 3
минуты бы
minutes.
шел процесс установки, после чего
I
мне
will
бы
have to
CM
install the
сказал бы,
rule,
что
the
нет, прости,
installation
я не
will take a
понимаю, что
minute,
написано,
after
иди
that
так
CM would
дальше.
tell me, no,
Вот.
I don't
Но
understand what
есть
you wrote,
немножечко
go
другая
fix it.
проблема, как бы правило мы
But
написали,
there
оно
is a different problem
собралось, но
here.
не
We
отработало на
write
наше
the rule,
событие,
it
которое
works,
мы создали.
but it
Вот. И
didn't
я
work
так
for the
понимаю, что
event
я просто
that
сделала,
we harvested here.
чуть-чуть не дописала регулярку.
And that means that I did not complete the regex correctly. Let me fix it.
Я не шарю.
Ну-ка покажи, как одеться. Выше.
Еще выше.
Нет, точно система здесь.
Точно не система.
Ключ object. Object name, везде object name, прям точно object name везде.
Да.
Онлайн траблшутинг.
Да. Нет, не во времени.
Возможно, обязательно.
No, it's not the timing.
Какой-то пожирнее, потому что после переделки так.
Мне просто кажется, что... Нет.
Incident, subject, correlation name, correlation type, importance.
Это все по шаблону это.
Нажми emit. Нет?
Какой emit?
Везде. Выше. Windows. Ключи. Ты уверен, что они совпадают? Да. Title Windows, не вендор, нет, ты все смотрела, проверяла. Там title Sysmon.
Все, простите. Внимательности. Самое главное, самое сложное в этой жизни, как говорил мой преподаватель математики, это внимательность и аккуратность.
Mindfulness and awareness, that these are the most difficult things in life.
Собственно, мы получили сработку корреляционного события. Вот, но сейчас
so we got a match with the correlation event, but I'm looking at it and I see the name of the rule that worked out. But I still don't understand what happened, what was the process, who launched it. But in order to do the proper investigation, we need to enrich the final event with some fields from the initial fields. So over here in the rule directive, you can also add the on function describing what happens when a certain event occurs. So from the first event pipe created, we can get the subject account field. These are the fields describing the user who launched the malware file. It's all very easy to use with all the snippets. In just 3 clicks you can get the whole suite of fields. Or we can also add the information about the process. That's the exploit. As a best practice, we add all subject process fields that we have. Maybe not all of the fields will be returned. The lines will just remain empty, but if before the correlation, we get some enrichment. I don't know. It finds the hash of this process somewhere and it adds it here from the launch event, for instance, and it will be appearing there before correlation. Then the hash will also be in the correlated event. That's why we add all fields, regardless whether they do appear in the initial event or not. What other extra information can we get? The host, for instance, where it all happened.
Из события старта сервиса.
The start service event. Let's see.
Я бы, наверное, забрала.
I'd say that I would get.
Имя этого сервиса, который у нас создавался.
The name of the service.
Вот. И из
and
события создания канала
from the pipe connected,
учетку, до которой все-таки были повышены привилегии. Вот, но смотрите,
the information on the accounts with the privileges. However, in the 17th and 18th events, this appears in subject account. You see here, subject account, this is my user, the test lab. And in the event 18, the system is data also appears here. If these events happen, in the final event, you can only have one subject account. So out of the second event, we need to add these fields somewhere else, for instance, into object account.
Вот, если мы сейчас еще раз
запустим наше правило, start the rule again, we will see that it will be a big correlated event that has a lot of different fields, a lot of information, and the analyst looking at it maybe will even understand something. The analyst will understand where to go to, what to look for, and what happened, and the analyst will start investigating. There is something that they can do. But again, there are many events.
Поэтому мы для себя придумали такие поля, как alert,
and that's why we decided we also
которые очень быстро, они всегда вверху
need to add alert key,
понять аналитику, а что же такого все-таки произошло. И мы
so that the analyst
важные поля для данной сработки.
Gets a clear understanding as to what happened. What's most important here is which process was launched so that the attacker could elevate the privileges. So that's the process. And alert context, I want to understand from which user and to which user the rights were elevated. But in pipe created, I only have the information from the initial user, about the initial user. So I will add it here.
Сейчас сделаю, потом расскажу, почему так.
I will do it, and then I will tell you why I did it.
То есть я в этом событии заполняю только первую половину контекста.
I fill out only the first part of the context.
The
user from which it all started. Then I draw the arrow, but I do not know where the process will end. So I will add the context here only if it was pre-populated before. But as to which user, to which user the privilege was elevated, I can learn only from this event. If alert context was pre-filled, or if we had this field populated earlier, then I can add it here together with the object account name.
До каких привилегий произошло повышение?
This will show me the level of privileges that the hacker obtained. Here are two main fields, and I look at them, and the analyst in the interface has here enough information for initial validation. These two fields will give the analyst understanding as to what happened. This is great if people who look at your rules, they have to deal with a lot of incoming information. There is a lot of data that needs to be analyzed, and they want to see all this information here and now, so that looking at it once, they would be able to understand whether they need to investigate it further or they can move on. To understand the context, we can also do some localization and meta information, but we'll do it a bit later. Now I would like to consider other techniques and see whether this rule that we've just generated will respond to the other techniques that are included into the Metasploit. So we prepared them in advance. I have these other techniques in the MetaViewer. And you can copy everything from here. We'll find the same events using the second technique. A pipe will be created, the service will be created, and the service will be connected to the pipe. But the difference is that we will see a fileless attack. It will be a DLL kind of attack. Event Viewer is a great tool. You switch to the XML mode, you copy it from here, and you create the second test. Here is one event. Here is the second event. Here is event 3. Again, we tell the normalizer that they are all Windows events. We save it and we run the test. What happens now is, under the hood, the normalization and correlation happen, and then we'll see what we're going to get in the end. The correlation graph is here, and all tests ran okay.
Нет, зачем, как бы? Работает же все.
No, why? It works. The comment is off the microphone.
Круто, ребят, очень классно, что вы относитесь к этому с пониманием.
Oh, that's good that you are so kind about it. So again, thank you for your support, because it's really challenging to write the code and to talk to it at the same time. So let's run the tests again.
Очень классно, я прямо начала кайфовать, когда у нас появился этот инструмент, потому что
when we got this tool, I loved it so much, because now I don't have to enter the same command 15 times over. I'll just have to change a couple of lines in the code, and that's it. My life has become so much better. The test failed. As expected, we are working on making this output more user-friendly. We are going to do it, definitely. We will parse everything. It's going to look much more beautiful. We have the second test, and we expected for the correlation to work. We expected one match. We didn't get any matches. Of the 3 events that we developed, only one of them actually matched the pipe created. Let's normalize the events of the second test and see what went wrong and why our rule did not work. Event 7045, as you can see, command line changed. It's not a fileless attack anymore, it's a drop DLL attack to the nodes. So, run DLL is called.
То есть нам надо немножечко поправить регулярку, чтобы она...
So here we need to correct the regular expression so that it would look like this.
Собственно, функция называется какой-то одной буквой.
The function has one letter A, it can be a different letter, and then followed by P, semicolon, and the name of the service or the channel. And what else changed? The service calls not CMD.exe, but runDLL. So in event number 18, we see that it connects not to CMD.exe, but to runDLL. And we can have two options here. First, it looks simple. We can use OR and specify another subject name, but that's not very good because it's hard to scale this code. Then we have a good function inList. It takes a list and it takes also a field which can coincide. We can have either cmd.exe or runDLL.exe. All that should be in subject process name. Now let's try it once again, and it should work. Yes, it works. Both in the test number 1, test number 2, we can see that from installer.exe, we've elevated the permission to the system level. Here we can see the new service. It worked perfectly, and it was much more faster compared to the previous test because we have pre-written code, and the only thing we had to do is just alter it a little bit for the new setting. And the last scenario, it's not creating the service, it's about addressing the named channel, and we'll see how the directive changes. And for that attack, the event 5145 is important, the access to the named channel, and obviously the previous events, we also use them because we work with named channels.
Obviously,
I will not run the test now because it's clear it will not be correct, it will not be perfect because we do not have the installation of the services. We will only work with the title channels, and that's all we have here. 17, 18, so this is the event 5145, that's the idea of the event for inter-process communication for share and this very weird channel, and you can see the name is here. So what happens in this event, and what's great here to notice, is that there is a connection for localhost, and I propose we add this event as an additional event. It would look like this. Let's call it DC. And the name of the title channel gets into a different field. It falls into object storage name. It's not just name, it's object storage name. And that's why in the key we put object.storage.name. Here we work on the Windows event. And here we end 5145 as ID, the access to the general network resource. And as previously was said, it's interesting here that it happens from the localhost side. It can be 127.0.0.1, or in our case, it's v6 IP. Now let's get back to this side. So what happens here? In all three tests, channel, and then we connect. But in this specific point, we can have some variety. We can either create a service or an event accessing IPC. And from this event, and from the IPC event, I want to create a few fields. Yes, I will add object fields. In general, we can actually run the test. And we can see if it works through, if our new set of rules actually goes through and works. It takes some time for the machine to run the tests because we have to redo the whole graph of correlations. But why do we propose the test-driven approach? Because we had some cases where we wrote correlation rules. It is a subnormalized event. Then people from a different team would come, they would change normalization, and the value which we needed would be put into a different field, and our rule would be useless, and we would learn about it only post factum. Only after that, we ran a few more tests and we tried to analyze why it did not happen, and then we were able to analyze and understand that it was because the other team interfered with what we were doing. And that's why we get all the events, we put them into the test, and if something changes, we will be able to know about it instantaneously.
Pipe connected in
event number 3. We do not have any. It was expected, but it did not happen. I understand that IPC access, pipe created, all of them are correct. But I was not attentive enough when I was looking at event number 18. It did. And the reason is And the reason is because it goes through subject process name for system. And why it's better to use in list? I don't really have to do anything else. I just add system right here, and that's all. Okay, let's try one more time. Everything works through, so we run quick test and it works. We can also have an integration test. But obviously we have some more work to do with the correlation itself. Because obviously you cannot give this information to analysts. It's not very useful to work with the fields. Analysts should have some minimal description. What exactly is this rule? What it finds? Some simple localization which exactly is stored in this field. And to be honest, those localization rules are not set in stone. I will just go back a little bit from the extension. I will show you the rules which we already have in our open repository. So, local rules, localization rules are not just some fields or some files which have description both in Russian and English. What they will see in the interface and how they're interconnected, how to connect between different rules. We have different criteria here, which make it possible to connect. And for me, to create the localization for the file, I had to edit 3 different files. And that's why we created this menu for localization where you can do it from a single window. And if I may, I prepared them so that we would not waste our time. I will just copy and paste it. We have description section. It's just general description on what exactly it's supposed to do, what exactly it's supposed to detect. Maybe we are studying some tools, then this is what we put here. Maybe we can say that it's some maybe it's some potentially fraudulent activity. And then we are working with the criteria, and that's the criteria, how it would be tied to my activation. If we have one type of localization, then here we will put a rule. But there are other options. For example, we can vary the description based on if the attack was successful or not. Here we have our internal rule on the localization of the Linux files for some critical files. Here we also have criteria for the status, if it's success or failed, and depending on the status, the text also changes for the operator to see. Maybe if user with this name edited the file or they failed to do so, but they attempted to do it.
Собственно, локализация — это какой-то текст статичный, в который мы
Now we have some static text where we can include some variables, some fields from our scripted event. Here, I must say that some users, okay, suppose some user run the exploit and increase their privilege to the system level. And we have the English translation of the same localization. So it works, it's fine. Then the analyst would see that it worked in CM and they would understand what happened and they were able to validate it fast enough. But then they need to understand if it's legitimate, if it's not, what kind of attack is this. And they look at it and not always, they can always be sure what they are supposed to do next. So for every rule, we have some metadata. For example, we put the author of the rule so that our SOC team and anything, they can refer to the author and ask about the rule. And they would say, write an email and say, it looks great, but I have no idea what it means. So instead of running in circles, they could address directly the person responsible for this rule. And we plan to give away this rule to the public. So it's also a little bit of self-publishing, self-promoting, that you can show the world that you created this rule. It also has scenario for the usage scenario, maybe use case scenario, and we can say what we tried to detect here. For example, attack number 1 from the get system Metaflow detected. Then we name the second attack, the dropper, and then we put the which we tried to detect. False positive is only for the rules which could be false, maybe for some administration, maybe for some reconnaissance where there is an IP config, and it seems suspicious, but admins usually do it like this. So the rule might work, but we still leave some information here in the metadata page that it could be a false positive in case there is some active work from the admin side. There is a section for improvement. Obviously, you can improve. You cannot create an ideal rule and forget about this and just send it to CM and be set in stone. Oftentimes, we leave some remarks, what can be improved. For example, if for whatever reason we did not have enough functionality, we did not have enough data, maybe we did not have enough time, but for now it's not critical. We can put these remarks here. And we still have to look through techniques number 5 and 6 for Metaxploit. And I will just leave them here for the future work. And once I open this information, I would see, oh, okay, I wanted to improve on techniques number 5 and number 6. And maybe community can take a look at this and then they can improve on it. We also have links. These are just links to some research, description, utility tools, exploits, maybe some heavy research. And the guys who work in SOC, they would not go directly to me at once, but they would go and read about this and try to understand what this attack is. So we believe it's a good practice to leave the links to the documentation, and I would leave this as a legacy to other specialists. Then we fill the next field on the source of data. What kind of data we need to actually detect this attack? Because if we do not have any events, if we do not have any rules for these events, it will not work at all. So for any rule, we leave this field. In our Microsoft Windows system, and it was for security auditing. 7045 creation of service and 5145 that's access to the general channel. I put them after the comma, but you can see that it now became better and you can read it easily. And I believe everybody knows about this big matrix. All the possible attacks, they are collected for many years, so much information here. And when you create a lot of content, you need some kind of measure, some kind of metric. Do you cover some portion of this matrix? Do you do well? Do you do bad? And that's why we try to map it for different tactics and different techniques from this matrix. So we had token impersonation and theft. And that's why we can use this technique. And we put the ID of this technique here on the privilege escalation. And you can put some random words, but the metadata will not be saved. So we have some validation just to make sure that we have consistency in our metadata.
О чем еще хочется сказать, наверное, немножко, это вообще просто по код стайлу.
One more point I would like to add about the code style, on how we work. I did not provide a comment on this line, which is repeated from one code to another code, from one event to another event. It doesn't look like a filter, though it uses the word filter. It's actually just an extra function. It's an outside function that is called macros. And when you program, you probably know that if you have a desire to copy a part of code and paste it somewhere else, it's better to create a function and reuse it multiple times. And this is what we do. It's this mysterious folder with filters or macroses. You can take some of these filters and reuse them in some other functions and in some other lines of code. So why do we do this? Multiple times we saw that in the beginning it works very well, And nothing bad would happen if I just copy and paste it. But among around 600 of rules, 400 of them use it. And when you create the code from scratch, it's fine. But then, once again, you understand that it works well, but not for Nix. And you need one more line that status should be success. Otherwise, it would not work correctly. And now you have to copy this line to other 400 rules. It's not very interesting stuff to do, and that's why we use macroses, and you just edit one of them, and they start to work correctly. Something goes wrong, we will be able to see it in our big pipeline.
Я себе на самом деле сегодня на выступлении заготавливала шпаргалку о том, в каком порядке
I actually prepared the cheat sheet for my presentation on how I will go, where do I start, why do we create rules, and why do we do so. But then I realized that this kind of information is actually very useful, and I should share this cheat sheet, maybe as a way to conclude my presentation. And I actually forgot mentioning the graphs. When we start creating rules, when we have a big database of incidents, and when you try to emulate a new attack, you might think that maybe you already have some information, maybe you don't need to create a new rule, maybe all these attacks are already covered and already captured. So we have this very interesting feature where we collect all these events. We can copy them here, and we can run them through the whole graph. It will not be very relevant for that specific rule because we already have it. But when there are many rules, then there are many raw events, it will show you how many rules were relevant, how many worked through, how many were tested. And this is where we start. Because if you have some coverage, you don't have to spend your time to recover it. If it works, you don't have to do it again. So this is how we work. We emulate the attack, we collect the events, we run it through the graph, we see if it works, if it's tested or not, then we make a decision if we need to create a new rule or use the previous rules. Then we create the rule, we double check it, we make the correlated events, we fill in the localization, we fill in metadata, we even have the checklist for our teams so that all the fields are checked. And then obviously, I believe it's important to share this with the world. I wanted to do this during the demo, but I don't have the internet. I wanted to push it to the security expert community to a file half request so that it would be in the repository. But unfortunately, I can't do it physically right here, right now, but I will do it in the evening. And just a few words on what kind of approaches do we promote when we write rules. First of all, the code you write, as a rule, one team writes the code, but the other team uses the code. So when we write the codes, we have to understand that if it's easier for me to understand, it does not necessarily mean that other people would understand it. So you have to think about others. Would they understand your code? We use rules, we use the words so that people would understand it. We use it as much as similar to the natural language as possible. If we have some snippets of code which are not easy to understand, where did they come from, how do you use them, we usually leave a comment like developers do. I really like to treat the rule code as a normal line of code. What else do we do with our rules? We test our filters on streams of information. Once you create your rule, before you give it to the analyst, you can copy this filter and see how many events are generated. And if there are too many, maybe this is a bad rule and maybe you need to fine-tune it. This is the first test we do before we give away our rules. We also use version control system. We have unit tests so that we would understand that everything perfectly well. But Dima will go into further details about this topic.
У нас на самом деле осталось совсем немного времени, поэтому я думаю, есть вопросы. Может быть, мы сейчас просто прикинем по количеству и тогда.
We don't have enough time. Maybe if we have some questions, and I will try to cover just a few sentences, and we'll move to Q&A session. First of all, we write tests. We try to use different practices. This is what Yulia demonstrated. We store content in Git. We use workflow. And our specialists analyze it, and they tell us maybe we should improve it. We use continuous integration for the tests, for the test integrity. Here are the QR codes for what we have. The extension itself, VS Code extraction and processing. We also have a Telegram. We have the repository for Yulia, for the code Yulia just wrote today. And we have the repository for different correlations, for different tests. That's all we wanted to cover. Thank you.
Большое спасибо ребятам. Давайте мы
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Два человека. Пожалуйста,
Let us have two questions.
Вопросу, а не так, что типа я сейчас 13 задам. Хорошо?
Just one person, one question.
Спасибо за доклад. Очень было интересно.
Thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting listening to you. My question is, did you think about the conversion of the rules from some open repository, from Sigma rule, Elastic Security Box rule, and maybe back between these two versions? Answer, yes, we have this idea. This idea is live, but obviously it's not done overnight. When we created the extension, it was important to cover our internal needs. Obviously, we thought about this, and maybe it will become somewhere in the future. I would like to add a little bit. Our extension is available in the open source. We have open source, and we'll be glad to have maybe some issue, maybe have request too.
Да, спасибо за интересный доклад. Такой вопрос.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. My question is, obviously your platform develops, you will have more new fields for your model. How would rule behave if it was created for a previous version or maybe for the next version if it does not have the necessary field? How do I express it in the rule? Answer. We have a team responsible for this taxonomy. They are responsible for fields, and they are really good at this because what they do is that when they bring new fields, they do the reverse compatibility. It's not like we bring a new field and remove the previous one. If you created some content before and then you had, then the old ones will work. But if you write a rule for the new version, where there are fields which are known for the old version, yes, there could be some nuances, but we have tests. It can be debugged and it can be easily found. Question. So I would have to have several versions for rules if I have different versions, if I have different set of fields for different versions. Answer. Suppose you start from version 24, 25, 26, 27, and you have different sets of rules for different versions. And we will go maybe up to 45. But thanks to this back compatibility, rule 24 will work, will continue to work, even in version 45. Yes, I'm speaking about direct compatibility. Yes, and in this case, you would have to have several versions, yes.
Да, конечно, если что, мы не уходим.
Obviously, we are still here. Questions? Thank you very much for the question. Thank you much for the presentation, rather. You spoke about CI/CD. Are there maybe in the future plans you want to cover some your internal processes, maybe use GitLab, the ones you mentioned? Do you plan to cover this topic? Maybe you upload this information to the community. So first of all, it's about the content delivery to the community. Answer: it was actually in the plans. It was actually to cover even now. We just did not have enough time to do so. And if there is a request, if there is a need to do so, we are ready to share our experience. We are ready to show it. There is no problem. And one more thing, we have a team responsible for CI, and the team is responsible for the delivery of the content. They work with the CI, but on our side, we will speak about our processes, how we develop Connect, because it's not that interesting. There are even better examples, and we will come later about more interesting approaches. We would cover more interesting news. We just decided to show you how it looks inside. Obviously, we'll have more interesting news later on. Let us thank the presenters for their very interesting presentation. They will stay here, and if you have any questions, you can come and discuss it. Obviously, they will be glad to do so. We'll have a short break for about 30 minutes, and please come in 30 minutes. We'll have the next workshop.